ever get that feeling, that feeling like you're meant for something more?
Yeah.
Like something bigger. Like there's a reason you're here, like a purpose, just out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah.
We are tackling that very question today. We're diving deep into a source that explores living with purpose.
Okay.
Specifically from a biblical perspective. And what's really cool about this is that this source, it doesn't just throw out like those feel-good verses, you know?
Right.
It kind of gets into the nitty-gritty of how to actually uncover that purpose, blending practical steps with inspiring examples from the Bible.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what I find fascinating is how this source starts with Jeremiah 29.1.
Okay.
You know that verse, the one about God having good plans for us?
Yeah, right.
But then it takes it a step further.
Yeah.
It doesn't just say, okay, God has a plan, good luck finding it.
Right.
It lays out this roadmap for actually discovering what that plan might be.
Okay.
So it's like, here's the treasure map, let's go on this adventure.
I love that. Speaking of treasures, this source also dives into the idea that God was intentional.
Oh, yeah.
In creating each of us, even referencing Psalm 139.1316, that part about being knit together in the womb.
Yeah, such beautiful imagery.
I know. I don't know about you, but that image always makes me think about how much thought and care went into, like our very existence.
Oh, for sure. It's powerful.
Right.
Yeah. And it really sets the foundation for this core distinction between purpose and calling.
Oh, okay.
They're often used interchangeably, but this source makes a clear differentiation.
Okay, I am all ears. Break it down for me.
Right. So the source explains that our universal purpose,
Okay.
the reason we all exist, is to glorify God.
Okay.
It's spelled out beautifully in Isaiah 43.7. And the source really argues that it applies to every single human being. But here's where it gets interesting. Our individual calling is how we specifically do that.
Okay.
So it's like we're all part of this same orchestra playing for the same conductor, but we each have our own unique instrument and part to play.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this source, does it give any examples of this?
Yeah. It digs into how that plays out.
Okay.
In biblical examples.
Cool.
Like Moses, Esther, and Paul. They all had radically different callings.
Yeah, I could see that.
Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, Esther saving her people from genocide, and Paul spreading the gospel to the Gentiles.
Oh, wow. Talk about diverse paths.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, if God has a specific plan for each of us, how do we actually figure out what that plan I is?
That's the question.
Right. Like, how do we uncover our own unique calling in this grand orchestra?
Well, that's where the source really shines. It lays out this 4-step process that starts with the most powerful tool we have.
What's that? Okay.
But it's not just about passive praying.
Right.
It's about actively seeking God's guidance.
Yeah.
Asking specific questions and really, really listening for his whispers.
So it's like, it reminds me of James 1.5, which encourages us to ask God for wisdom.
Right.
It's like saying, hey, God, I'm a little lost here. Can you point me in the right direction?
Exactly.
Okay, so we're praying, we're reading scripture. What's next? Where do we go from there?
Step 2 is all about identifying your spiritual gifts and your passions.
Oh, okay.
The source gets pretty specific here, referencing 1 Corinthians 12.4-7 and Romans 12.6-8.
Okay.
Which list out a whole bunch of spiritual gifts.
I mean, I've heard of spiritual gifts, but...
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
From teaching and prophecy to acts of service and giving.
No, that's where I get tripped up sometimes. Like, I'm pretty sure I don't have the gift of prophecy.
Right.
But sometimes, I get so excited about sharing a new book or a recipe or whatever.
That I practically force it on people.
Okay, I see, yeah.
Does that count as a spiritual gift?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of what the source is saying. It's not just about having like some supernatural ability.
Right.
It's about how your natural inclinations and your passions can be used for God's purposes. So that passion that you have for sharing things you love, that could be like the spark of a gift of encouragement or exhortation.
Okay, that's a new way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So it's not just about waiting for some like miraculous sign or some lightning bolt.
Right.
It's about paying attention to what already excites us.
Yeah.
What we're naturally drawn to.
Exactly. And it's in those areas.
Okay.
Where our natural abilities intersect with God's purposes, that our true calling can often be found.
This is already giving me so much to think about, but I have to ask.
What if you're still feeling lost, even after all that praying and scripture reading and soul searching?
Well, that's where step 3 comes in.
Okay.
Seeking guidance from wise mentors.
Okay, yeah.
Proverbs 15.22 talks about how plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed.
Yeah.
We all need people in our lives who can offer perspective,
Right.
encouragement, and maybe a little reality check now and then.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like having a personal board of directors for your life.
Right.
Each bringing their own wisdom and experience to the table.
Okay, so we've prayed, we've identified our gifts, we've gotten advice. What's the final step in this journey of discovering our calling?
Step 4 is where the rubber meets the road.
Okay.
Taking action.
Okay.
This source doesn't let us off easy with just thinking about our calling.
Right.
It challenges us to actually take steps.
Okay.
Even if they're small. Even if we don't have the whole picture yet.
This reminds me of the story of Abraham, who was called by God to leave his home and travel to a land he had never seen.
Yeah.
Talk about a leap of faith. It makes me wonder, what would it look like for us to take a leap of faith in our own lives, even if we don't know exactly where we're going to land?
That's a powerful question,
Yeah.
and one that the source encourages us to wrestle with. But before we dive into that, let's take a moment to acknowledge that this journey of discovering and fulfilling your calling, it isn't always sunshine and roses.
Right.
There were going to be obstacles along the way.
Yeah.
It's like setting out on a cross-country road trip.
Yeah.
You've got your map, you packed your bags, you're excited about the destination, but there are going to be detours, traffic jams, and maybe even a flat tire or two along the way.
Right. And let's be real, those unexpected bumps in the road, they can really throw us off course, especially when we're trying to figure out something as big as our life's calling.
Mm-hmm.
The source actually dives into some of the common obstacles we might face on this journey, and I have to say, it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, it is. One of the biggest roadblocks the source identifies is fear and doubt. That nagging voice that whispers, what if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if I make a fool of myself?
Yeah.
It's something we all wrestle with at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
What's interesting is that the source actually uses Moses.
Oh, wow.
As an example of someone who struggled with doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the guy who parted the Red Sea.
Yeah.
But even he had moments of feeling inadequate.
You're right.
Yeah.
In Exodus 4, Moses tells God that he's slow of speech and tongue.
Right.
Basically saying he's not the public speaking type.
Yeah.
But God reassures him and even provides Aaron to speak for him.
Exactly.
It's a great reminder that God equips us for the task, even when we don't feel ready.
I love that. And sometimes the obstacle isn't so much internal fear as it is external comparison.
Oh, yeah.
The source talks about the danger of looking at what other people are doing and feeling like we're falling short.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in that trap, especially in the age of social media.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like everyone else is out there, living their best lives.
Yeah.
Effortlessly pursuing their passions and achieving their dreams while I'm just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life.
It's that classic comparison game.
Yeah.
And the source throws us a lifeline with Galatians 6.45.
Okay.
It reminds us to focus on our own work before God.
Right.
Not on what everyone else is doing.
Right.
It's like comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah.
Totally pointless.
Yeah.
And ultimately unhelpful.
So true. And speaking of things that can feel pointless.
Yeah.
The source also talks about something that I think resonates with a lot of us, the waiting season.
Oh, yeah.
Those times, when we're faithfully seeking God's guidance, taking steps, but nothing seems to be happening. It can be so frustrating.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the source uses Joseph's story as an example of navigating a waiting season.
Okay.
With patience and faith.
Right.
I mean, this guy went from favored son to slave to prisoner.
Wow.
All while remaining faithful to God.
Wow.
It took years for his calling to fully unfold. But when it did, he became he became second in command of all of Egypt.
Talk about a plot twist.
I know.
His story really illustrates how those waiting seasons, as difficult as they may be, can actually be God's way of preparing us for something even greater than we can imagine.
It's like that saying, sometimes God calms the storm and sometimes he lets the storm rage and calms his child. You know, those waiting seasons, they can be refining times, moments where God is working behind the scenes, shaping us and molding us for the calling he has in store.
So we've talked about the roadmap for discovering our calling and the obstacles we might encounter along the way. But what does all this actually mean for us?
Yeah.
Sitting here listening to this deep dive.
Yeah, that's the question.
How do we take all this information and apply it to our own lives?
Well, that's the key question. And thankfully, this source doesn't just leave us with a bunch of theories and concepts. It offers some concrete takeaways.
Yeah.
And challenges.
Oh, good.
To help us move from head knowledge to heart transformation.
Okay, I'm ready for some action steps. What does the source suggest we do with all of this?
Well, first and foremost,
okay,
the source emphasizes that each and every one of us has a purpose.
Okay.
You know, it's not some like mystical concept reserved for a chosen few.
Right.
It's woven into the very fabric of our being.
Yeah.
And that purpose is discoverable.
Okay.
It might take some digging, some prayer, some soul searching, but it's there waiting to be unearthed.
I love that. Yeah. It's so encouraging to know that we're not just wandering, aimlessly through life, but that there's a plan, a purpose, a calling specifically designed for us.
Exactly. And the source reminds us that the obstacles we've talked about, fear, comparison, waiting seasons.
Okay.
They're not roadblocks. They're opportunities for growth.
Okay.
Think of them as refining fire.
Okay.
Shaping you into the person you're meant to be.
Okay.
It's not if you'll face challenges, it's when.
Right.
Yeah. But the good news is you're not alone.
Yeah.
God is with you every step of the way.
Right.
Equipping you with the strength, wisdom, and the resources you need.
That's such a powerful reminder, but I have to admit, even with all this encouragement, I still find myself wondering, what if I miss it?
Yeah.
What if I miss God's calling for my life? It feels like such a high stakes game sometimes.
I understand that feeling.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that fear of missing out.
Yeah.
On what God has planned for them. But here's the thing. God is not a micromanager.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not sitting up in heaven waiting for us to mess up so he can say, gotcha, you missed your chance.
Right.
He's a loving father who delights in guiding us.
Okay.
Even when we take detours or wrong turns.
That's a much more comforting image.
Yeah.
So if we're not supposed to be paralyzed by fear, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
How do we actually move forward in this journey of discovering our calling?
Well, that's where the source gets really practical.
Okay.
It wraps up with a challenge, a thought-provoking question designed to kickstart our own personal reflection.
Okay.
And it's this: if your life were a book, what would the title be?
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's deep.
I know, right?
I'm going to need a minute to process that one.
It really makes you think. The title of a book captures its essence, its main theme. So what's the theme of your life?
Okay, yeah.
What's the story you're meant to tell? The impact you're meant to make.
Right.
The legacy you'll leave behind.
That's a powerful exercise.
Yeah.
It forces you to think beyond your day-to-day tasks, beyond your immediate worries.
Yeah.
And zoom out to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What's the overarching narrative of your existence? And how does your calling fit into that story?
Exactly. Your calling is inextricably linked to that story. It's a driving force behind the plot, the fuel that propels you forward.
Right.
So what kind of story do you want to tell?
Okay.
What kind of title reflects the unique calling God has placed on your life?
Yeah. I can already feel the wheels turning in my head. This source is really making me think about my life in a whole new way. But I appreciate that it doesn't just drop like a thought bomb and leave you to figure it out on your own. It actually offers a concrete challenge. Spend some dedicated time this week, maybe 10 or 15 minutes each day, in prayer and reflection.
Yes, and here's the key. Don't just think about it passively. Actually write down what you sense God is saying.
Okay.
What whispers of purpose are bubbling up? What talents and passions are you noticing? What steps are you feeling nudged to take?
Yeah, I love that it's not some vague, overwhelming call to action.
Right.
It's a simple, doable step.
Yes.
One small, faithful action towards your purpose.
Yeah, because even the most epic journeys begin with a single step.
Yeah.
So what will your first step be?
That's the question we'll leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge that this journey of discovering and living out your purpose, it can be messy.
Yeah.
It can be challenging. It can be filled with twists and turns you never saw coming.
That's so true. But here's the beauty of it.
Okay.
It's also incredibly rewarding. Because when you align your life with God's plan.
Yeah.
You tap into this source of joy and fulfillment that nothing else can match.
Yeah.
And that's something worth fighting for, something worth pursuing with all your heart.
So as you go about your week, remember this.
Yeah.
You are not an accident. You have a purpose. And it's waiting to be discovered.
And sometimes that discovery process, it means embracing the unknown.
Right.
Trusting that even if we don't have all the answers, God is still leading us forward.
That's so true. It's not about having a perfectly mapped out plan. It's about taking those steps of faith and allowing God to reveal the path along the way. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it's worth circling back to that powerful verse from Jeremiah 29:11 that we mentioned earlier. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future.
It's so good.
It's such a beautiful reminder that God's not some distant, detached being who set things in motion and then step back.
Yeah.
He's actively involved in our lives.
Right.
Guiding us, cheering us on, working all things together for our good. But something that struck me as we were talking about this earlier is that good doesn't always look like what we expect it to.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We tend to think of good in terms of material success,
right,
comfort, or ease. But what if God's plan for our lives involves walking through difficult seasons, facing challenges, even experiencing suffering?
Yeah.
Does that mean He's abandoned us?
Yeah.
Or that He's no longer working for our good?
That's a tough question, and honestly, one that I don't think there's a simple answer to, but this source challenges us to consider that maybe, just maybe, God's idea of good is bigger than our own limited perspective.
I completely agree. And this goes back to that idea of glorifying God.
Yeah.
Being our ultimate purpose. And the source makes the case that sometimes glorifying God means reflecting His character, His love, His grace, even in the midst of pain or hardship.
That makes me think about people like Corrie ten Boom, who found purpose and meaning even in the horrors of a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Her story shows that even in the darkest of circumstances, God can use our experiences to bring light and hope to others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it highlights the fact that living with purpose, it isn't just about finding our own little niche in the world.
Right.
It's about becoming part of something much, much bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Something that transcends our limited perspective.
Yeah.
And taps into the very heart of God.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you, dear listener, to embrace this adventure of discovering your calling.
Yeah.
It might be challenging, it might be messy, it might lead you down paths you never expected.
Right.
But it's also an incredible privilege to be invited into God's story, to play a part in His grand design.
And who knows? Maybe your unique calling is that missing piece that completes the puzzle. The brushstroke that brings the masterpiece to life. The world needs your gifts,
right,
your passions, your unique perspective. So step out in faith, even if it's just one small step. And let your light shine.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling energized and ready to take on the world, or at least my little corner of it.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into living with purpose.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep shining.